over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone back to part 2 of our Turn Coordination Chaos into Connected Control. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Vince Danielli. I am our Manager of Construction Services here at IMAGINiT Technologies. I've been with the company for a little over 15 years with closer to 20 years of experience in design and construction. And I'd say up to this point, my area of specialty is really advanced consulting. So I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds and hundreds of different customers from different backgrounds and different disciplines. And yeah, it's been an exciting career for me here at IMAGINiT. So other than that, I'm located in Detroit.
And I am Matthew Hoff. I'm a construction sales specialist here with IMAGINiT. Need to update that slide topic there because I think it basically hit a year this week here at IMAGINiT. So celebrating 1 year supporting customers. And then I have 7 years of construction technology experience between being like a construction technology manager for a general contractor, working at Autodesk and technical sales, and then 10+ years in the industry in the BIM VDC, where my area of expertise is. So specialty would be, a lot of model-based workflows. And then I am located in Fort Myers, Florida. So today is part 2 of a 2-part series. So what I thought we would do is kind of revisit part 1 quickly from a slide deck standpoint for those that might be logging on right now that didn't see part 2 or part 1. So we'll just quickly kind of cover the topics from part 1. Then I will talk about work plan, schedule, the schedule model module in build, and then the subsequent work plan feature of the schedule module. From a PowerPoint kind of slide deck standpoint. And then Vince, I'll hand it over to Vince to do kind of more of an in-depth kind of live demo of the features and functionality. And then at the end, we'll certainly have time for questions and Q&A. All right, so with that being said, so just to quickly touch on the coordination aspect of our kind of turn coordination connected, into connected workflows is essentially with model-based workflows and using, maybe BIM Collaborate Pro or model coordination, you have the ability to, gain a lot of efficiencies in the typical coordination process. And a lot of this revolves around storing files in docs, creating a coordination space to folder structures, and then using that content to coordinate your trades, right? And you can create sandbox sites for trades to do preemptive clashing. You can make public and private sites, so you can do stuff in a vacuum if you so choose to. And then you can separate out your coordination, spaces by levels or areas, or do whole building coordination depending on the needs of the project. And what's really important is just the flexibility that this allows, in typical, old school coordination processes with like maybe just a Navisworks workflow, it's very, it's not very flexible, right? Files are just stored on SharePoint or maybe project drives, and you're dealing with, NWCs or IFCs, or AutoCAD files. And so with model coordination, you have the ability to, kind of remove duplicate information in your coordination files. You can, set up additional folders, for parallel information that supplement your coordination process by identifying the folders that need to be included. Identifying, unsupported file types will not be included, so you don't have to worry about that, but you can identify, hey, I don't need the DWGs because I have the NWCs or vice versa, right? So just having that flexibility, and then even being able to bridge files between projects is another added efficiency process on our model coordination workflows, because we understand that not everybody is in the same project at all the time. So another aspect that we touched on last time was the automatic clashing. So I was a clasher, a model coordinator, if you will, back in the day, and the steps that it took to set up your Clash Detective and Navisworks and go through the Clash report was cumbersome. It took a lot of time. So with the automatic clashing and model coordination, we can quickly identify disciplines that are wreaking havoc in your models and identify those cases and deal with them immediately versus waiting to find out who are the big offenders. And you can do this by this kind of model matrix here, and you can coordinate it by the levels, the areas, the full models. You can remove disciplines from the matrix. You have a lot of flexibility in just understanding the health of your initial coordination project. And like many themes in ACC, data is king. So capturing the critical metadata in your workflows is really key downstream. When you're in the moment, a lot of these data points are understood because you're dealing with it in real time. But downstream, when you're handing off the project, a lot of this context is really valuable. And if you're not capturing it in the process, you can't go back, right, and grab it. So identifying the issue types, the root cause of the issue of is it a trade partner just not coming to the table fully prepared? Is it a design issue? Is it a lack of documentation? And then attaching that reference information to an issue and understanding if there's an RFI or schedule impact and why, and then having that context downstream for the reporting side is really valuable in this process. At meetings, you'll see meetings in the build module as well as model coordination. So this is a kind of a slept-on feature of ACC. So just understanding the ability to set meeting agenda items, track assigned tasks, linking those references again to those agenda items, tracking whose ball and court is where, and getting buy-in right from everybody involved in the meeting process. The transparency aspect of tracking the ball and court aspect of meetings, and then being able to send those meeting minutes after the fact is to in-person meeting stakeholders, or even individuals who maybe didn't attend the meeting but still want purview into what's going on. So that's a availability in model coordination and build. And then again, get back to the data, right? So just being able to report on the data from an insights perspective, just knowing from a quick glance what's maybe assigned to you in your ball and court, versus being able to create robust reports from a one-off perspective, or maybe even from a scheduling perspective. So think like Clash reports being sent out every Monday morning, right, for the team to review and understand what's asked of them to resolve for that week. And so as we take these models that we're coordinating, we can create assets off of them, right? And so from the asset side of ACC, there's kind of two schools of thought. You can have 3D assets that are coming from model content, like Revit models, or you can have what we would kind of consider like a 2D asset with it's just inputted data, right? So from like as you see on the screen, from a Revit perspective, you can map to parameters in Revit. And import those assets and then track, different properties, right, that you can add in. From a manual standpoint, you can operate from like an Excel spreadsheet template that we provide and track your assets that way as well. If maybe model workflows are not part of the project, maybe you don't have BIM requirements on the project, you can still track assets from a 2D data perspective. And so being able to customize the info is always important, right? To categorize the info to suit your needs. So you can import your category or your assets from like a division a master format perspective, or you can customize it to fit your needs. If you're just tracking, assets from, maybe a tool perspective, and you don't need that division breakdown, you can just add in the tools, personnel. There's a lot of functionality or flexibility with assets. You can create, use or create the different status sets to track that makes sense to your workflows. And then you can add in custom fields like being able to capture manufacturer information, O&M, warranty information, anything product related, you can add that in there. And like model coordination workflows, linking assets or linking references to your assets is nothing different than that process, right? So as you are tracking maybe install statuses of equipment, you can track whether it's procured, delivered, installed, gone through the commissioning standpoint. From a usage tool or personnel standpoint, you can track where you're at on the location in the building. You can track who's using what and when and where and why. So there's a lot of contextual data that you can link to assets. So you can, as you can see on the screen here, from correspondence information to random files that might pertain to the assets, to submittals, RFIs, even cost. And then again, asset reporting and dashboards, this is going to be a common theme. We're going to touch on it on the schedule and work plan side as well. So the more data you collect, the more powerful the reporting and insights will be through predictive analytics, just understanding your workflows and being able to identify root cause issues to then tackle the next project around. That brings us into today's part 2 of schedule, and then subsequent work plans out of schedules. And so inside of build, right, so there's a schedule module. And so it's good to just clarify real quickly that it's not a schedule creation tool. It's more of a schedule consumption tool. So you can upload your Primavera P6 schedules, your Microsoft project schedules into there. And then from that, you can visualize the schedule, right? You can use it to create plans, so work plans, and for further granularity. So think, 6-week look aheads, some kind of a foundational, pour plan that you need to track, all of the tasks involved. You can compare schedule versions. So if you are updating your schedule at regular intervals, not just milestone intervals, you can understand what's changed between versions just to understand. You can track plan percent complete through the work plan aspect and other metrics. You can quickly identify those critical path needs to get your project done on time in a safely manner. And then as you have seen in the past, you can connect assets to your schedule and even references as well. So from a schedule aspect, this is a visualized version of a schedule imported into schedule in build. And so you can see you have both your task breakdown and a Gantt chart view. And so from here, you can obviously infer, the schedule needs. But what's really kind of powerful is the ability to, as like a foreman or a superintendent or project manager on site, if schedule impacts, whether it's a weather delay or a delivery delay or an RFI delay, you can identify those delays against the schedule and suggest, say, hey, I need a couple extra days because of such and such, and then you submit that to the scheduling platform, and then the master scheduler, the CPM owner, will then take those suggestions and review it, right? And then if it's deemed that yes, the schedule does need to push, then they can go back through the Primavera P6 aspect and update that schedule and push a new version back, right? So you are using the schedule features to inform the real world situation and conditions that you're coming up against. And so again, compare versions, so understanding the differences between schedule iterations. You can add those references. So if it is a weather delay, a schedule impact because of an RFI, you can link that RFI to that schedule task to keep that contextual reference right throughout the process. And then you can filter activities based off of task type, company, right, milestones. There's a lot of flexibility in the filtering section, and then you can obviously share this schedule externally as well. From a work plan perspective, so you think, not everybody has the ability to create a highly detailed schedule. Sometimes it's more milestone based with kind of overarching tasks, like, my example here is a foundation pour. Typically foundation pours don't last, multiple days necessarily, but they can certainly span multiple days if it's a pretty massive pour. And so being able to track that with more granularity inside a work plan than might be in the P6 schedule or the CPM schedule is really important. And so I think TAC planning, pull planning, kind of aspect, if you will. And so from the schedule activity, you can create individual tasks against that. So if you see here on screen, I have a foundation pour that's coming from the schedule, and then I am creating, the individualized tasks that make up that whole foundation pour, from, laying out to rebar delivery, excavating, forming and pouring, doing underground rebar work, you can see on the screen. And so they're all linked to the various trades that are responsible for that task, right? So identifying the predecessors and the successors. So if something moves, you understand the schedule impacts based off of that movement. And most importantly, you're getting buy-in from the trade. So everybody is on the same playing field. It's a very, again, transparent process where I commit to showing up on that day with the amount of personnel needed to tackle that task, and you have my buy-in. And as you can see there at the end, link and references to, again, tell the whole story of what's going on. From a task detail, just wanted to highlight what it kind of looks like, and just the myriad of information you can attach to planned tasks. So again, committing to tasks. So this is great for just getting buy-in. Holding everybody accountable to showing up when they say they're going to show up, and follow through on that task. You can identify the different status types, and create other status types that make sense to you, whether it's delayed or open or completed, or in route, right? Whatever the case may be. There's different work types from a work delivery aspect. You can track plan percent complete. So this is kind of going down the EVM process of just understanding, the amount of duration, the amount of personnel it's going to take, and how far along are you on that of completing that task. And assigning tasks, again, this comes back to reporting and dashboards and analytics of just understanding the trades that are really excelling, maybe even completing tasks ahead of schedule, or certainly on time, and tracking against those that are constantly past due on their tasks or creating schedule nightmares. You can track priority. I talked about crew size, understanding those predecessors and successors, and the link between them, and what is needing to be in place before you can move on. And again, the ability to link references from files, photos, sheets, R5 submittals, whatever the case may be that you need to link to that specific task. And then we have a dashboard ability from plans. So unfortunately, our project here isn't a robust project that has a lot of activities that have come and gone. But you can hopefully kind of infer what this would look like on a live project, being able to track the monthly plan percent complete based off of the work and trades involved, understanding the lowest performer, highest performer, completed tasks for the weeks, completed task for the next week if you're doing like a 6-week look ahead kind of a plan, and then being able to break down the status of the tasks from the various statuses that you have available in your work plan. And then for that, I will hand it over to Vince to do kind of a live walkthrough of what we just kind of covered.
Cool. Thank you, Matthew. And you're right on the mark, right at 20 minutes as planned. So good timing. If it were me, we'd be already at like 40 minutes. So, okay. So for my part, I definitely want to cover the topics, or at least focus on the scheduled topics. But I know in our last session, we got cut a little bit short, and there were some items around assets that we had planned on discussing in part one. That I will start with. So in those slides, Matthew mentioned the ability within ACC to have both model assets created and mapped in your project, and then the other opportunity where you could potentially have, Matthew calls them 2D, some people call them just like a data point to track an asset in the project, but there's a lot of flexibility in this tool. And I feel like it is one of the more, actually both of these things that we're talking about today, assets, schedule, work plan, are probably two of the more underutilized areas of ACC. Work plan is kind of, I mean, it's been around for probably about a year now. Assets has been around longer than that. But generally, I think people, other tools that they're coming from don't really have this repository for project-based assets. So it's just not utilized as much. And that is really one of the points of us having this presentation, is to show where Autodesk does have additional tools at no additional cost that can really impact the delivery of your project and coordination of the project. And a big part of that is assets. And all of the stuff that led us up to the assets tool, the model coordination, all of this data can be fed throughout the entire project lifecycle in order to optimize your processes. So whether that is actually linking model data into assets or doing some type of import into the assets tool to create that repository of managed assets in your project, it's kind of up to you. And you can do a hybrid of both. You can have some things that are coming from the 3D model that you want to track, and then you could have other categories that you create that are simply just data points. When Matthew and I were preparing this presentation, we talked about how you could track tools and equipment on the job site. And in the slide, Matthew mentioned that the status sets that we have in assets are fully customizable. So maybe we just want to track when a certain piece of equipment or a tool is checked out on the job site and when it checks back in. You could create a custom status set that's just called checked out, checked in, or available, and you can associate that to the category that you set up for the job site tools. So there's a lot of customization and flexibility available within the asset tool, which is one thing I really like about it. You can definitely utilize this for more than just tracking building components. But getting into the process of mapping those model assets, we set this demo project up with basically 3 different discipline RVT models. These are just published in the files, or they're stored in the files area of the project. And when you're setting this up, you simply add a model. So through this process, if I have an RVT or an NWD that I'm going to use as my source of that asset data, you just add the model. As long as it's in the project, it's stored somewhere in the project. So this one's grayed out because we already have the architectural file mapped. But as long as it's in there, we can map it inside the project. And then once we have a model mapped, you'll notice that for my architectural model, I have not yet mapped any assets. That's why there's just a hyphen here. Through this tool, we can import assets from the model. So I'll just do this really quickly with a very basic example. We've set up our categories to align with like a CSI division structure. But under openings, if I go into import the assets, we create the rules and criteria of how we want to extract, or what we want to extract from the targeted model here. So in this case, if I'm looking for openings, maybe more specifically, certain types of doors, maybe egress doors, you can create rules to basically filter the model and extract the assets that you want to manage. So in this import composite objects, I'm going to set my property. There's all types of properties, and these can be custom properties from your Revit model. You'll notice as I start to scroll through this list, my slider gets smaller and smaller because it's loading more and more and more properties from all of the Revit families that are in this project. So if I simply search, if I know I'm kind of familiar with this process, I might want to search by the family type or the family category. Let's do family category because that can be based on, I think this is correct. Revit family name is, and then I find some type of like a single flush door or something like that. Let's see, there we go. So if I just want to extract all of the doors of this type from the project, I set up my filter criteria, I show the results. And what this does is it basically sifts through that RBT file. It's going to give me a list of all of the assets or family components that meet my property filter. And okay, cool. It's got a bunch of UIDs that are associated to those from Revit. So it doesn't look like this list is that extensive, which is good. Good example for this demo. And once I've mapped, so there were only 14 doors that met that criteria in my project, I could obviously be a lot more general about it, and I could have subcategories to openings that were, so if I had 08 openings and I have a subcategory set up to openings that was just exterior doors, then I could find some different criteria that I want to filter on the Revit model. Got to push those assets into a proper subcategory. Probably for openings, I could be a lot more generic. I could just look at the Revit category type of doors and just map all of my doors at once. So again, you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to process the data here. And the great thing about it is if you make a mistake, if you said, oh, filter by name, exterior door, and then you realize, oh, I have a bunch of other families in that project that are exterior doors of a different name, you can always go back in here and add assets to the category after you've initially mapped them. So once I've got that preview, 14 assets are going to map to my openings next to the mapping properties. This is kind of a really neat thing here. So I've already selected the assets that I want to basically import into my asset tool or map to the models. But beyond that, Matthew talked about how we have all of these different columns and fields in that asset view that provide insight to what we're managing in the project. Well, we can use the properties, again, from these Revit components to fulfill or to basically import properties, map properties to specific asset fields. So if that's confusing, I'll just show a really basic example here. If we have something like barcode, maybe I want to use an asset barcode just based on the Revit GUID that gets associated to those doors. So if I want to map barcode, again, we have the properties that we can search. So let me see, I think it's just ID. And ID filled out a whole bunch. So let me do GUID and see if that comes up with anything. Guide. Nope. Let's see, Revit ID. I think that might be the ticket. Let's see, Revit category. Well, anyway, there is an ID field. I think it might have some underscores or something interesting in front of it. There it is, element ID. Man, I knew there were underscores in there. Okay, so I don't know why it's coded this way, but underscore Revit is the category and element ID is the thing I was looking to map to the barcode. So apologize, but finally found it, element ID, and then I saved that. The asset field that I'm mapping is simply barcode. I could map a whole bunch of different ones, and if we had custom fields associated to this, 08 openings category, then we're not limited to just the 4 or whatever were in that last dialog box that we can map to. So this does include, and we can map to custom fields as well. So I review those changes. It's just going to give me a quick preview, and I'm going to apply that. Created 14. Excellent. Now I have 14 assets mapped. It tells me the date that I imported those assets in. And now if I go back to the main assets view and check out that category here, openings, you will see that, hey, there are the 14 doors that I just imported from my model. Category is what I set it to. Automatically, the status of those just comes in as the default, which is specified. So they're probably, I guess, the default that it's spec'd. And then the barcode. So this does match up. I could have removed this from the name of the door, but if you look at the Revit element ID here that's in the title, that matches up to the barcode. So I just wanted to show that you can map those custom properties. And then the cool thing about model assets, if I select one of these from my assets list, and this is available on the mobile app as well, you can pull up your whole asset list via the ACC mobile. So I can grab an asset on the mobile, or even better, if it had a barcode or something, you can scan that with the camera on your mobile device. And if we generated the barcode based off of this number in the field, when we scan that, it's automatically going to pull up this particular asset. From there, if you're in the field, or if you've got a skid, a pallet of material that was delivered on site, and you scan it, it will pull up the asset, and then you could mark the status of that asset to be delivered. Now, this might be a strange one for doors, but again, we mentioned earlier, the status sets can be fully customized, so it doesn't have to be limited to these, call these out of the box. This is the default status set that Autodesk gives us with assets. But if it was just a check-in, check-out type of item, you can customize that. So there's only 2 options in the status. So really helpful for field people that are managing the job site materials, managing these equipment or tool assets in the field. And it's pretty intuitive. If you do use barcodes, or if they know what category they're looking for, they can go right to the asset tool in the mobile, pull up the category, check in a tool, check out a tool, log the hours that it was in use, etc. Once I've marked the status on this, and I'll do this for a few others, I'll just kind of, maybe I'll do a bulk select and say, hey, all of my doors were delivered today. So I'll just edit that whole list and change their status to delivered. That should update. I have to wait for that to finish. I think this refresh will just refresh my web page. There we go. All right. So all of these doors, now if I select one of them, you'll notice that it has this nice little model area at the bottom. And if you remember, this is the model that I pulled this asset and imported this asset from. From there, this kind of serves, like Matthew was talking about, how we can reference all different types of stuff. From here, if we just simply click on the model link, that's going to open up a 3D view of the model. It automatically turns on this special view within the model viewer to view the assets. And we should be able to see, based on the status color, a bunch of these different elements highlighted based on that color, which for these doors, the delivered color was purple. It zoomed me right into that door that I had selected and clicked the link. But if I do zoom out a bit and just kind of navigate around the model, you can start to see all of the doors. You can change visibility. This model, especially the architectural model, has a whole lot going on. But if we wanted to change like the wireframe settings or anything in here, the transparency of the model, you can do that. But think of things like pipe runs or duct runs, and you've got your different runs mapped out in assets. Once things are installed or commissioned, you can change the color on that, and someone like a CPM that's viewing the status of construction they can pull up this view and they can start to look at where things are in reality in construction. So right now, this is isolated to just these doors because that's the only thing that we've mapped within this model. But if you did have walls, fixtures, receptacles, you name it, and those had different statuses associated to them, all of those different elements would be highlighted in their color based on the asset. So pretty cool stuff. We can always open the model, and you can do this in the mobile app as well. You can click on an individual asset in the model and then change the status right from the model view. And that in turn, once I close this out, so I just mark that one door as installed, which changed the color to blue. It updates the asset list. Oh, not receptacle, hold on, where I'm at, openings. There it is, that one right there. So that's some of the functionality. We'll tie this into work plan and in just a second, but I did want to show for a data point asset, it's not as the process to get the like placeholders or to get a 2D asset built in this project doesn't require all the mapping that the model does. You can just simply click the create asset button, type in the name of the asset, which category you want it to be mapped to, status, and then any of the additional fields, custom fields that you built, you can manually enter in values for that. It might seem like a lot of work if you're doing that individually per asset, which because it is. Autodesk does give us an import template. So if you already had a list of managed assets that someone filled out in a spreadsheet, or you took it from like a drawing data extraction or whatever the source data is, and it's already sort of formatted in a spreadsheet, you can use that information, you can input into the Autodesk import template, and then you can import your assets. So it's going to create those line items based on what you copy and paste into the import template. I think in the earlier slide, Matthew had a screenshot of what that import template looked like. And once you import them in, it will fill out, name, category, status, barcode, any of the custom fields that you might have. You can add all of that stuff to those imports. So pretty cool functionality there. I'm going to move out of the assets in just a second, but one thing I did want to mention, it's not a huge focus of this presentation that we're doing because we're kind of talking about more construction coordination through the actual construction process. But if you're working with any owner clients and you're managing like closeout submittals or even we work with a lot of owner developer clients that want to manage their as-built projects in the construction cloud, there are a lot of APIs for the asset tool. So if you're using a program like Maximo or Aptura to manage your facilities, all of those items can be linked to the assets in ACC via some integration. So if there's something like a ticket that comes in, like a maintenance ticket via Maximo, and we want to update any documentation or a record of that maintenance back to the construction cloud, those integrations can be created. It's not out of the box. I don't think that there are many that have a direct integration tool, but they can be developed via the APIs. So I know that comes up occasionally and we have those discussions with different clients, but I wanted to just mention that this can be more than just a construction coordination managed asset. All right, so then jumping into schedule. So in this project that Matthew and I set up for the presentation, we've got a couple of different versions of schedules, and then we have some different work plans created. I always like to start in the schedule and then go to work plan, but I also like to point out that if you don't have, maybe you're a subcontractor and you're just managing, or you want to internally manage your crew, you don't have to have a schedule. You can create a work plan without a schedule. If the general contractor doesn't want to share the schedule with you, that's okay. You can still sort of manage your own portion of the work via, well, via either, you could create your own schedule, or if you don't really have schedule tools like that, you just want to have the critical path and some of the handoffs and things recorded, you can definitely create a work plan without having a schedule in place. If we want to maintain or get, or not maintain, but get all of the power from the schedule tool, I think the best workflow is having a schedule and then linking certain tasks and milestones from that schedule directly into your work plan. So in this view, we're looking at the schedule right now. And Matthew mentioned this early on. The schedule tool in Autodesk, it doesn't allow you to edit or create the schedule. It simply allows you to import a schedule that's created from Microsoft Project, Primavera P6. There are a bunch of other ones. I think Astra Power or something. There's another scheduling tool. But it does support versioning. So if we have this AU Towers V1, and this was our initial schedule, if we update that schedule, we would just grab the same name. In fact, I probably wouldn't label that V1 because chances are someone will save that as V2. The file needs to be, actually it doesn't need to be the same name. So it could be V2. We just upload it over the top of the schedule to update it. And then Matthew mentioned we would be able to then do some schedule comparisons between different versions of the schedule. And they would show you kind of a side-by-side comparison of what the original start date was, what the original finish date was, and what the update to that schedule is in a compare view. With each one of these schedule tasks, we do have a number of data points that we can input. Most of these are derived from the actual schedule software when we do the import. But if there was additional references or information that you need to associate to a specific task, whether that's an RFI, an issue, an asset, every one of these schedule tasks has the ability to have different references from our project. So I know Matthew mentioned that a lot on the during the PowerPoint, but this is where you would go. You would just simply click on a task or a milestone within the schedule, and you can import, or not import, but add an existing reference from the project. Now, and that could be related to things like change orders or RFIs, but just in clicking one of these, you can say, let's tie that RFI to the schedule task. So if there was a delay or something, we might see what the reason for that delay is in our reference section of that task. Matthew also mentioned that we have the ability as, the CPM, maybe we're uploading the project schedule and our team, we can control who has permission to do this, but we want different people on the team, whether it's the superintendent, foreman, project engineers, project managers. We want them to have the ability to update or make suggested edits to the schedule from things that are impacting the construction schedule. So if I switch from a viewing mode, which I was just in, to a suggesting mode, we can click on these little pencils on the dates, and we could say, hey, for our long lead procurement, that was scheduled for June 6, 2025. So these dates are about a little over a year off. But we can say, you know what, there was stuff that happened. My references are associated to this, to impact or that have schedule impact, and we need to push that out a week. I can update both of the start and the finish date. And if I wanted to add details or comment, we must not have root cause set up in here, but I could just type in a note. Add that note. And you might be wondering, and I'll probably mark that as delayed as well. I mentioned we can't directly edit the schedule, so we're not actually updating the project schedule by making these suggestions. But once we've logged all of our suggestions, and they might have some impact, I probably wouldn't take the time to update all of these dates by a week, because I know that they are subtasks of this milestone. So if I'm updating the milestone to say, hey, I'm delaying this a week, when this goes out to the scheduler and they actually approve that, let's say they approve that schedule change and they update the schedule, then through the scheduling software, it will automatically impact all of these dates below it. So you could be granular and go into each one and change the start and finish dates. This one doesn't look like it has that much granularity. There's a little bit here, but a lot of these start on June 25th. But they should all push out a week based on my change to the overall task. Once we have our suggestions in there, we submit this to what I would call the schedule manager, so the scheduler. And then on their end, and I just happen to have project admin permission in this project, so I can show you what the schedule manager would see. They would get a notification that there's been a request, a suggested edit to the schedule, and then they can go in and review those suggestions. And they can see, okay, hey, Vince on this date took this item and delayed it by a week. It's currently in review, but if we agree, like, okay, yeah, that definitely is going to impact the schedule, we can mark that as mitigated, mark it as updated, save our response. That won't automatically go back and update the schedule. But if the schedule manager is going through a whole bunch of these items, they can keep track of what the suggestions were, take that back to their scheduling software, update them, and then once they mark that, kind of jumped the gun there to mark it as schedule updated. But once they update it, they can mark that as updated, and then we know that the next version or the new version of the schedule will show that change. So it's really more or less just a communication tool to send the suggestions, the comments back to the scheduler so that they can update the schedule. All right, and let me go back into this. So we already sort of pre-baked the plan into this office building schedule. The process of doing that is pretty straightforward. In that one view, on the schedule view, you just create a new plan either through here and link it back to tasks within the schedule, or if you start from the schedule view. Oops. Darn. I'm clicking too fast here. Back in the schedule view. If we need to develop or create a new plan associated to the schedule, we can click new plan here, and that will bump us into the work plan view. Or if I say, you know what, Matthew is using the foundation pour as the example, I can click on this task and I can actually grab all of the subtasks to that and then generate a new plan based on those scheduled tasks. I'm not going to do that because we already have a plan for this foundation that we did this exact thing. So I'm just going to hop over to that. Oh, this was not the one that had the foundation pour. That was in the AU tower one. But for the level 1 overhead rough, you can see we've created a version. Let me zoom out a little bit. And this is what the work planner looks like. So we set this one up where each one of these items represents a company-based task that's associated to the milestone. And outside of the schedule, I showed you that there are a lot of detail in the schedule, and we could always type references. There are a couple of areas that we can edit information in the detail of the schedule tasks. But once we get into work plan, this is where you have a lot of granular control over these elements. It's almost like you're creating a sub-schedule. That's what really this work plan is, to generate a work breakdown structure or something more specific to the milestone or the task in the schedule. So if I clicked on this level 01 deck, this is our structural steel company. They're responsible for manufacturing, probably shipping or delivering the structural deck to the job site. We can really highlight the duration of a specific task within an overall task, what the dates of start and finish are for that, the company responsible. If we wanted to indicate a specific user that's associated to that task, we can. What their role in the project is. Now, if it's location specific in the project, like level 1, we could associate that to the proper location. And then if we did have a work breakdown broken out, which, I don't think we have one for the overhead rough in here, but we could say, you know what, this is associated to construction. And then any additional, Matthew mentioned, if it's a high priority, if it's low, if it's normal. You have a lot more data points that you can update associated to these tasks, which ultimately will improve the quality of your reporting and your analysis throughout the project. So I see that we're running kind of close on time. I just want to show a couple of really nice things about WorkPlan. Right now we have this separated out by company. We didn't take the time in setting up this data set to go through all of these different fields, like the assignees and the roles, but in the swim lane view that we're looking at here. So right now you can really just visualize, say, okay, well, level 1, the material for the deck is responsible by this company. Then there's a handoff to our deck pour, which is Great Lakes Contractors' responsibility. And then we have the actual, this is, I think, our linked schedule task with the dates automatically set up from linking it to the schedule. We've got sort of all of these different subtasks for that overhead rough-in. So the way I would look at this is there were sort of some pre-tasks that we had to create that led into the overhead rough that we can then manage. And then one nice thing about one that I didn't point out that is pretty critical, I'll just switch this back to manual. We can update these tasks based on % complete. So if I go, all right, well, today is 2/9 and I'm here. So we should be at the point of installing the main ducts and installing the storm drain, maybe at the beginning of storm and sanitary mains. We can take this overall task and say, you know what, just based on that, my rough estimate on the overall milestone is we're about 15% complete with that. Now, because we have all of these subtasks that lead up to the main one, you might have noticed that my duration and the % complete was set to auto. What that does is when you're getting really granular into these subtasks and completing them, that will update the overall % complete of this main task. So if it's saying that, hey, throughout this main task, this has a 2-day duration, if we mark that status of that task is complete, it updates it to 100%, which if I had this set back to auto, it would aggregate that % of whatever that task was for the full duration. It would give us a % complete of the overall task. So managing these subtasks, we can do that. Sorry, what I wanted to show here is that we are able to change the swim lane views. So if we did have a WBS for the project or for this specific task, if we split the tasks out, we have marked where they were at. I think my 2 should have, let me scroll to the left a little bit. There we go. There's that level 1, the level 01 deck. That falls into that swim lane. Everything else, because I haven't assigned it to a WBS, is just unassigned. But as we go through these different items and start to populate that information, it just organizes this view in a different way. And we can also switch from a swim lane view into a task view. And all of this stuff is connected to those task items in the work plan. So whether you're updating it through the list view or through the swim lane view, it doesn't matter. They're all the same data, same items that you're editing. And then we can view the handoffs, the successors, predecessors to those items. And furthermore, They did just recently, I don't know, Matthew told me, I hadn't seen this as we were preparing for the demo, but Autodesk just rolled out this metrics probably in the last few months, maybe 6 months or so, that there are just sort of stock cards associated to work plan where you'll start to see the task breakdowns. He mentioned we don't really have a lot of great data in these data sets. It would kind of take actual project activity to give us anything worthwhile, working through these actual things. But as an overview, this is great. You can do some filtering within these different cards, but you can't really modify the visual of the card. But there are additional tools in ACC. If I go into my project insights page, if we want to have more control over what we're reporting, how we're reporting it in a visual, every project has its own dedicated Autodesk Insights, which do have, like this one we're looking at here, I call these stock cards. They just come with the program, very similar to that metrics page I was looking at. But if we wanted to customize these views and start to embed things like Power BI reports into an insight view, you could pull a Power BI card. And then there is some work to get your Power BI reports to actually show up in the project. If you're familiar with Power BI, it's not all that complicated. You just have to publish your report to Power BI online, grab the URL from it, determine if it's public or private. And then when you configure this, you simply put that URL into the card, and that will display your Power BI workspace. To get that data, in the project, if I go into the project's data connector, we can schedule extraction. So this can be scheduled as frequently as daily. So if we want to pull updates and update our dashboards on a daily cadence, we can set up the schedule to run daily. But more importantly, what I wanted to show here is that with every instance of Autodesk build, we have the data connector, and we can get into these Power BI templates. So Autodesk has taken a lot of time to create some generic, well, I shouldn't even call them generic, they're specific dashboards for the different tools. But these are really good templates to start in Power BI, and they do include things like asset dashboards. We use this one actually in the screenshot for our PowerPoint, but outside of assets, we've got, scroll down, all of these different ones, photos, quality, but getting into, trying not make sure I'm not passing it. But here we have a schedule dashboard. So you can start to pull things like, hey, what are our activities that are taking longer than 15 days? What's complete and who's the discipline responsible for it? What's the schedule type? Like all of those different data points I showed in the schedule can be published into a dashboard, and then you can use those really any creative way that you want to create filters and tables, and then you can publish these dashboards to your projects. And I believe that there is one, I think there's one that's associated to work plan, which is probably, oh, maybe they don't have a stock one, but I know from my experience, you can pull that data from work plan via the data connector, and you can create your own dashboards for like those work plan specific. And Matthew for helping with the presentation.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.